Welcome to another episode of People You Should Know, which is a collaborative storytelling partnership with the Evanston Roundtable, the Evanston Chamber of Commerce, and Byline Bank. I'm Annelise Rise, Executive Director of the Northwestern Buffett Institute for Global Affairs and Associate Provost for Global Affairs at Northwestern University here in Evanston. And I am delighted to introduce someone who I've been dying to connect with for some time, John Hewko. John is the General Secretary and CEO of Rotary International, one of the world's largest service and humanitarian organizations in the world, with 37,000 clubs and 1.4 million members. And John was, prior to being here in Evanston, managing partner of Baker McKinsey's office in Kyiv. So he's really well positioned to talk about what's happening in the world today. And I also want to mention that prior to that, he was executive secretary to the International Advisory Council to the Ukrainian Parliament, where he actually helped to draft the Ukrainian Constitution. So, John, we're just thrilled to have this chance to talk with you. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Annelise.
So, first of all, let's talk about Rotary. Do you have Rotary clubs in the Ukraine or in Russia?
We do. We have first Rotary Club in Russia was opened in 1990 when it was still the Soviet Union. We have about 80 clubs there now, about 1,067 Rotarians, and we have over 60 clubs now in Ukraine with about 1,100 members.
Wow.
So we've, particularly in Ukraine over the last 5-6 years, we've seen significant growth in membership. A lot of it being sort of the outcome of the, after the Crimean invasion in 2014 and the Maidan Revolution and the role that civil society played in the Maidan Revolution. You really just saw really a blossoming of the concept of giving back, of giving back to society. And so we've seen a significant growth in our clubs, because Rotary really is all about serving the community and giving back to our communities.
So have you been in touch with your club leaders or club members in Ukraine and Russia over the past 2 weeks?
Well, it's been sort of all Ukraine all the time, and it's sort of the wonders of modern technology, WhatsApp and Facebook and all that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm in daily touch. I still have a lot of family in Ukraine. Fortunately, most of them are in Western Ukraine, but a lot of my former law colleagues are, a couple of them are stranded and trapped in Ukraine. It's an extremely dire situation, what's unfolding in Ukraine right now.
So, as someone who is truly an expert and deeply knowledgeable about the situation on the ground, have you been surprised by events over the last 2 weeks?
I was not surprised about the invasion. I've always felt that if you sort of listen to what Putin has been saying certainly over the last 10 to 15 years, particularly some of the statements he's made over the last 5 or 6 years, it was very clear to me that he wanted Ukraine back, either in the form of a vassal state or incorporating it into Russia. And I'd say there are really four reasons for that. One is that people talk about NATO and NATO expansion as being perhaps something, and I think that was a part of his sort of position and thinking, but I don't think it was the primary one. I think significantly more important was the fact that Ukraine was a budding democracy. It wasn't perfect. Still had issues of corruption, rule of law, but the civil society extremely strong, very free press. 6 individuals have been now president of Ukraine. In fact, if you look at the last presidential election, where Volodymyr Zelensky won the election, he was going up against an incumbent in the post-Soviet space who had Petro Poroshenko. He had all of the levers of state power behind him, and he lost by 75 points. I mean, that's almost unheard of even in most developed Western democracies. And so it was something that, having a thriving Western-leaning democracy on his borders was something that I think he couldn't really fathom. There's also the whole imperial issue of recreating the Soviet Union and the Russian Empire, and if you read the essay that he wrote back in July of 2021, that's sort of pseudo-historical analysis, which is very error-laden, to be generous. Ukrainians aren't a people, it's not a language, they're just Russians, etc., etc. So I think there were a number of factors that went into his calculus. I think the least was really the NATO piece. I think the rest of it was much more the recreation of that Soviet empire, of the Russian Empire, the historical roots, etc. So I wasn't surprised at all that he was at some point going to invade. What
about the response for the Ukrainians? Did that surprise you?
I was in Ukraine I worked in Ukraine from 1991 to 1996. And that first year, 91 to 92, I was working as a legal advisor in the Ukrainian Parliament. and was very active in the independence movement, and was in the Ukrainian parliament building when Ukraine declared independence. And my parents are from Ukraine. They came to the States after the Second World War. Grew up in a Ukrainian-American community in
Do you speak
in Detroit.
Ukrainian?
I do.
Wow.
I do. In fact, I went to kindergarten. My English wasn't that great. And I worked there for a long time. And so just the euphoria of, my God, Soviet Union fell apart, independent country, something my parents, grandparents had sort of dreamed of for generations. And it was a bit disappointing because it was obviously the transition from the communism to a post-Soviet state. And countries like Ukraine, Russia had it much easier because when the Soviet Union fell apart, the deal that they cut was Russia would accept all the Soviet debts and obligations, but they got all the Soviet assets, meaning all the embassies, etc. And it just picked up the Soviet bureaucracy, all these ministries, etc. Well, Ukraine in 1991, when we became independent, had a bit of a foreign ministry because they had a UN presence, but they had to build all the organs of government from scratch. And so the Ministry of Foreign Economic Relations was just, 4 guys in a room not much bigger than a normal office trying to set up a ministry from scratch. And it's been a rocky road, and with the issues of corruption and rule of law. But as we got into the Putin regime, the steps that he did and the actions that he took vis-a-vis Ukraine, even prior to Crimea, but starting with Crimea and subsequent to that, have probably done more to create in the Ukrainians a sense of nationhood and of people than probably any single thing, certainly this century and in the second half of the last century. So his actions were designed to really sort of bring Ukraine back into the Russian fold. It's completely backfired on him. And so for me to see that evolution from early 1991 to now, and this ferocious opposition and heroic that you're seeing from the Ukrainians against the Russians is extraordinarily heartwarming to see, in a sense, because it has sort of been the final step in the development of Ukrainian feeling of nationhood. It's a tragic way to get there. It's horrific what's happening. But Ukraine has now a nation, and I think what he's done with this invasion is really for generations to come a ruptured sort of Ukrainian-Russian relations. The animosity he's created and the opposition he's created in the Ukrainian people is going to take generations to overcome. But I think we're all just sort of amazed at how they've been able to push back against this extraordinary Russian onslaught.
It's incredible. So we're both international lawyers. So tell me how you see the role of the rule of law in this. Is there anything that any role for legal institutions in bringing about justice and peace in this space?
Well, I mean, we need to achieve peace. We need the Russians to stand down. We need them to withdraw to certainly where they were before this last invasion took place. They've illegally annexed Crimea. They've illegally gone into Donbass and created these 2 pseudo-independent enclaves. And so from a legal perspective, just about everything that Russia has done vis-a-vis Ukraine is illegal and improper. And so I think the real question you're getting at is are we facing a post-World War II situation of war crimes and serious atrocities being committed? And I think all of us watching TV, certainly listening to the reports that are coming out of the State Department and other places, there seems to be fairly ample evidence that what's happening there, certainly when it all ends, will probably result in some sort of legal repercussions at the International Court of Justice, etc., for some of the protagonists in this horrific invasion.
So one of the things that I think many of us admire about Rotary is your commitment to peace and to caring for people who are migrants, refugees from war situations around the world, and you've done this for generations. What is Rotary doing about this situation right now?
Well, Annelise, as you said, the whole concept of peace and conflict resolution and building goodwill among people, it's not just a slogan in Rotary. It's really something that goes to the core of our DNA. On a lot of levels, we run one of the largest youth exchange programs in the world. It's not just the U.S. to some country. It's Japan to Zimbabwe. It's Brazil to Slovakia. Some around 9,000 students a year every year pass through our student exchange programs, and we've been doing this for decades.
I was a Rotary scholar in Taiwan.
Okay, so you're very familiar with that aspect of it. Through all the humanitarian work we do, we have sort of 7 areas of focus that we dedicate our sort of money and projects toward. Some of them, maternal and child health, disease prevention, treatment, literacy, environment is our newest area of focus. Eradicating polio. In 1985, it was Rotary, a nonprofit, not a Minister of Health or Ministry of Health or a multilateral institution. It was Rotary, a nonprofit, that said we're going to eradicate a disease from the face of the earth. And we had 350,000 cases of polio back in '85 when we started. We're just down to 2 countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan, where the disease is still, the wild polio virus is still raging. So we're very close to eradicating the second disease in human history. We're very active in the creation of the United Nations. There were something like more than 50 Rotarians that participated in the various working groups in San Francisco that led to the UN Charter in 1945. We were very active in the establishment of UNESCO. And of course, in our polio eradication efforts, we've worked very closely with UNICEF. So peace and conflict resolution is a huge part of our DNA. We offer 100 scholarships, full-ride scholarships every year for students to do master's degrees and certificate programs in peace and conflict resolution. We have more than 1,200 alumni now who've gone through our Peace Fellow program. So it's an important part of what we do as Rotarians, bringing people together, creating the conditions for peace, and something we're very, very proud of.
And so when it comes to this particular conflict, do you have a view of what civil society organizations like Rotary can do?
Well, we play a huge role. In fact, we've just established a disaster response fund. We've raised over almost $1 million in 5 days. Wow. From Rotarians around the world, and it's just really early days. And we use the money in that fund to provide grants to our Rotary clubs, primarily right now in the frontline countries and in Ukraine, to deal with refugee issues. Wonderful. That's something we think it's an immediate need. We can immediately help, and then we'll be following that up with provision of medical equipment, donations, in that sphere.
And having
as well.
the network on the ground, so that you have the relationships to make sure the work is done in the best possible way. That's really exciting.
Well, that's kind of the beauty of Rotary. We're both local, regional, and global at the same time. In fact, if you look at the history of Rotary, it was founded in 1905 in Chicago by a gentleman named Paul Harris, and it was really set up as the first LinkedIn, before anybody had heard of LinkedIn. It was to bring businessmen at that time together to help each other professionally. And over time, that sort of concept of community service took root. In fact, the first service project that the Chicago Club, which was the first club did, was putting in place public toilets in Chicago. And it's sort of taken off from there, and we're sort of the intersection between commerce and cause. You join Rotary to network professionally, to meet great people, but also to really make a difference, whether it be in your community, locally, regionally, or globally, in terms of like polio eradication, for example.
Well, it's so interesting because here we are, I direct the Buffett Institute at Northwestern, which is a big global institution focusing on international affairs. You direct one of the largest international organizations, the world, right here in Evanston. I'm just interested in what you think. It just seems to us from down the street as we look at this that we're at a moment now where maybe there's more of a role than ever for non-state solutions to some of these issues, and that civil society broadly conceived is going to be much more part of the solution around some of these issues than ever before. I don't know how you see it.
Well, absolutely, and just on the sort of basic humanitarian level, dealing with all the refugees, for example. I mean, civil society is going to have to play a huge role. The government can help, of course, but housing all these people, working with them, training, giving them opportunities, and that's what Rotarians are extremely good at. We have a long history of working with refugees, and many Rotarians passionate on that issue. But you also, I think, raised, I think probably something that you're looking at the Buffett Institute is, and Tom Friedman in the Post in the New York Times had a great article about this, that the whole notion of global cancellation of something, and the fact that you're using social media and all these channels, the war is in everybody's living room in real time, Telegram, all these social media channels, that in a way that's never been possible before in history, you can have an entire global cancellation and a boycott of, in this case, Russia as the aggressor. So it's changed the whole dynamic of public opinion, of managing war, and of hopefully getting to some sort of peaceful resolution.
Which also makes me think that another thing that our institutions have in common is that we can, in a world of global council culture, we can be a space where the nuances come out, where the relationships prevail, where we can say, I disagree with you, but I still respect you. I still care about this relationship, and I want to understand it from your point of view. Certainly that's how we see the role of the university now. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of what we're all about in Rotary, is really bringing people together. And really, there's no second-class citizens in Rotary. 75, it was founded here in the United States in 1905, but 75% of our Rotarians are outside of North America now. And most of our growth really is outside of North America. And it's just, for me, been really... I've been in this job now 11 years, to see this true multinational, multicultural institution that really works. There's no second-class citizens. We're now here in our boardroom, and our board reflects the internationality of our membership. And we work in 9 languages officially. You can see we have our interpretation booths just like in the United Nations. We simultaneously interpret all of our meetings. I think we have 33 Rotary magazines around the world in 31 languages. So I think we try to embody in not only our rhetoric, but in the way we act, to really promote this idea of goodwill and peace among people in a very, very real way.
That's wonderful. Well, let's work together. Let's make Evanston the center of global peace going forward.
So look forward to working with the Buffett Institute.
Fantastic. Well, listen, there's so much more we could talk about today, but this is all the time we have for now. I just want to thank everyone for joining us, and thank you, John, for all the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.